Today's passage of Scripture is found in the Gospel of Matthew, and we're looking at chapter 2, verse 13 through 23. This is the flight to Egypt. Starting in chapter 13. Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Rise, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him. And he rose and took the child and his mother by night, and departed to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, Out of Egypt I called my son. Starting in verse 16, Herod kills the children. Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem, and in all that region, who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Raham, weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they were no more. Verse 19, the return to Nazareth. But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead. And he rose and took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. And he went and lived in a city called Nazareth, so that what was spoken from the prophets might be fulfilled, that he would be called a Nazarene. So our reading for today and the passage of Scripture that we looked over brought out a memory that I recently had during the holiday. This picture here by Léon Cognet, a Parisian painter from 1824 is when he painted this particular painting, but he was kind of an overlooked painter, but yet if this piece is one of the most powerful pieces I have ever seen regarding the Christmas story, especially having this be so relevant to the particular story we're reading here in Matthew. I wanted to just give you a chance to look at this. I'm going to go ahead and just zoom in here a little bit if I can, so that you can really take a look at this face. You can see here in the background that this is when the soldiers were coming after to kill the children, and a mother just frantically holding 2 babies here. One's just fallen out of its own cloth. There's some others here that are kind of, that one is perished and one others that are running here in the background. Here's Mary depicted here behind this broken wall, just desperate, this face like we have caught her, and her desperation to protect her child. You can see that she's covering baby Jesus's mouth with 2 fingers just to keep him silent as not to give him away. Now we know that the Lord spoke to Joseph and warned them to get out of this city, but so they may not have been in a crisis scenario such as this, but this painting for me really invoked this emotion of being a mother, and I just want to think about that today as we do our lesson. We're not going to use this particular image, although I do have a bonus for those of you that have joined us over in our resource vault. You're going to actually find a margin of the month where I used this painting to do a little sketch of this image, so that if you are in the vault, you'll be able to get this margin of the month and be able to use that somewhere in your Bible. Today's picture is going to be a little different, but the story is still the same. It's that of protection and that true horror that would have been running through Mary and Joseph, and how different it is now for us knowing the whole story, what it may have been for them in that moment, knowing that Herod was raging, and especially knowing who Herod was. There's a famous quote by Augustus Caesar who said, it was better to be a pig, one of Herod's pigs, than to be his own son. He was known for being vicious, killing his own family. So imagine this enragement that he had when he thought that a king was going to overtake him. So after looking at that picture, I was reminded of a Melbuff family quote that my cousin Denise we've often joked about it. We're actually both in the school system, and we both have children, of course, in school. And we've joked often about certain situations where, there's been issues at school with a friend, or even been on the receiving end of a parent frustrated about something that's happened with their friend. And we have this joke that says there's nothing uglier than a mother bear protecting her young. I think there's some lightheartedness in that quotation, but there's certainly some truth behind it. We know that mother bears are very protective of their young. This is something that just comes natural to them. But us as mothers, we have this instinct that when our child is in risk of danger, or if we fear something for them, that we can become ultra sensitive to that place, because it is our job to protect them. And when I think about that situation that Mary and Joseph were in, I just am overwhelmed, especially reading, this part gets me every time, the part about Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they were no more. And just that absolute devastation at the thought of losing and the loss of a child. And when I look at this verse, the only thing that came to mind visually for me was exactly that, a mother bear just fierce as can be at the thought of protecting from something evil happening. And so I want to use this imagery of a mother bear, but first I want to go through some of our lettering here, because I do want to plan out our page using kind of a blocking method. So I have penciled in what I am using for the verse, which is she refused to be comforted because they were no more. But the symbolism of what we're going to look at here is a grizzly bear. So I've got two images here that I've printed out in different sizes, because of course, depending on the image or the style of journaling that you're doing, you may want a smaller image, but this is definitely a place where we're going to use some tracing methods, and then we'll go through the lettering with us as well. Now this page here, I'm probably going to use the larger bear just because I kind of want it to fill the bottom of my page, but you could certainly just go in there with the face of the bear and kind of keep it more in your margin. Again, that's a preference, but that's the beauty of being able to print and shrink and size your pictures on the internet. Okay, so for the lettering today, I'm going to be using a series of 3 different styles. One is going to be kind of a loose cursive style that's a little more slanted and soft. We're going to use that for the word she, for the word comforted, kind of slanting them. You can add some tails to them. It's basically just a fancy print with some tails and curves, and we're really kind of, our slant is going this direction, kind of a slant this way. And then they and were. So these are kind of some of the softer words of this particular phrase, or this particular verse here. This is actually part of verse 18. And then I'm also going to be using, just for my filler words, to, be, and because, I'm going to just use a real straight, kind of tall, skinny font, such as this. But the next one is really going to be my power words, the word refused and no more. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the font here by using pencil, and then I'll trace over it with Sharpie so that you can see how you can formulate these words as well. We're going to use something that's very similar to a lightning bolt or a rip of material. So something that's kind of got a little wiggle to it, maybe some rough points, maybe some raw edges. And we're going to make these hollow letters so that we can fill them in with color and just kind of give a more powerful effect. So the letter R might look something like this. But in order to achieve that, I'm going to go ahead here and flip over my paper. In order to achieve that, it's really easy for you to just go in and start by writing out the letters of the word that you want to spell out. In this case, we're going to use the word refused. So I'm just going to go ahead with very simple font, and you'll notice I'm kind of spacing them out a little bit more than normal, and I'll just kind of stop there at the S. So you can go ahead and just trace it with pencil to see what it looks like, erase as needed. If you're brave, however, you can go straight to the Sharpie. And you're just going to trace around the outside with some squiggly, kind of pointed, rough lines, and remember also to go on the inside here as well. And that's going to give you that really kind of raw, rough letter style. So again, with each of these, we're going to go all the way around the letter that we've written. And feel free to change things up as you go. Just kind of make them uneven, kind of rough. You do want to be a little consistent on the thicknesses of each letter, just so that you don't get too different looking. Okay? And so once you've done that, you can go back in with your eraser and erase the original lettering, and you end up having this kind of, if you remember the symbol No Fear, that was kind of a popular brand. They had a nice logo that looked very similar to this. It's kind of that same thing, but it looks kind of just raw and edgy, and it makes me think of somebody screaming or showing madness. All right, so next we're going to be looking at tracing, and as I stated before, we have two pictures here that were printed out in different sizes. I'm going to show you two different ways that you can trace. One that you can trace without anything at all except for a dark pencil lead, preferably a heavier pencil or a charcoal pencil like this one you see here is an ebony. So if you look at this one here, I've gone ahead and added in my pencil on the back, and then what we need is a ballpoint pen. And I'm just going to go ahead and use a scrap piece of paper to show you this method. So we'll do this. So as I place my picture, I can place it wherever I want on the page, and I can hold it here and place a little piece of tape on the corners, or just hold it still. But you want to make sure that you don't move it as you go, because if you do have a mess up, let's say, and you've picked this all the way up off your paper, it's going to be very difficult to line it back up. But what you would do here is to just simply take a ballpoint pen, and you'll notice I'm kind of going back and forth as I trace, and I'm going to go ahead and capture as much of the detail and important areas of this picture as I can. And I am definitely using quite a bit of pressure here. So don't be afraid about the marks really that you're making on the front of your picture. You're just really trying to capture the important areas and the important details of the work. So I'll just do a little bit more here of the mouth and nose so that you can see how that's going to work for us. Sometimes, because when you're tracing, you're getting just an outline. So if there is a section, like say inside of his mouth here, I'm going to go ahead and just do a little bit of coloring in. That's just going to allow me to have that reference for later. Get some teeth in here. All right, so let's go ahead and lift this up, and what you'll see are those marks which were left from his mouth and nose. So you can see the reference there, and that worked really well because I can see right what I'm doing and just trace right over the picture. I do love this method. It's great for easy transfers. Use this in the classroom a lot of the time. The kids are very successful with this, as long as you pay attention to the details. If you do a real quick, here's his head, here's his ears, you're not going to get the quality that you're going to want for going forward with coloring. All right, the next method is actually using a small trace light board. I'm sure you've used a tracing table before, but some sort of a light box. This is called Life Color, and we're actually going to provide this for you in our journaling supplies tab. You can buy this through Amazon. We'll make sure that that's listed for you over on our website. So all of our favorite supplies that we use, either that coaches reference or we reference, we try to keep those in a tab over there on the website so that you can have easy access to them, and it will go right to your own Amazon cart. So with the Life Touch, it's a very thin, let me see if I can pick this up here. It's very, very thin, and this is great because when you're tracing into your Bible, you can lay that right behind and fits right in there. The traditional boxes would have been a huge thick area, and you have to be able to have a flat surface. It would have been very difficult to do that with the flexibility of a book. We also notice here that there are measurements which make it really great for lining things up. And then we have an on button here, so you're actually going to be able to press and get to a brighter setting. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep it on the highest setting, and I'm going to go ahead and place that behind the page that I'm working on. You can see that it's very thin here. And then, of course, I'll lay the image in there that I want to use. Now this, you know what I'll do also, I can cut some of this or fold it. Let's see if we can do that. Fold this over. There we go. There, that makes it a little better. And the cool thing about this is that we can really line it up, line it up, move it as we know. We can kind of get a vision of the entire page and how it's going to look. So I'm going to go ahead and take a few minutes to trace around this, get some of the image of this bear on here. I am going to take some notice of where some of the fur is, because later when we come back in here with colored pencils, I definitely want to see some of those textures. All right, so we've gotten to the point of the lesson where we are going to be finishing this page up with some color. I've got this traced here in black pen. I love to use a Sharpie pen. I also highly recommend Faber-Castell has a wonderful set of Pitt pens that are great to invest in. You can find those on our journaling supplies site over on our webpage. But a good old Sharpie pen works excellent for, doing some what we call faux calligraphy, kind of that idea of filling in the down lines with thickness. It also is great for nice straight lines, and of course for outlining anything that you're going to be coloring in. So I'm going to go ahead and get coloring these in. One of my favorite techniques to use, I use it pretty often when I am coloring in a bubble letter, is to use multiple colors kind of in a blended or ombre look. So I'm going to go ahead and just get something a little more hard pressed underneath my my Bible here for just a second. I have so many different tabs and tags layered up in this Bible that sometimes I need to just get myself something there under. So when I do this, I like to try to think about, what I'm going to be using down here. Now I have a special technique to show you guys for coloring with some multicolor. So we're going to go really abstract and fun on the coloring of this bear. So I'm not going to worry so much, but oftentimes what I'll do is I'll kind of think about what is the color of the main image, and then I will use colors either if I want it to be matching, I'll kind of match the hues, but often I like to have them pop. So I'm going to stick with some brighter colors. I'm going to go ahead with getting kind of a medium yellow, a nice orange, and probably like a burnt red. And I may actually finish up with almost a darker brown maroon tone. I think that's going to be really nice. So I'll be working from the lightest color down to the darkest color. So as I fill these in, I am using here, these happen to be some polychromos, but I also have some right here. I'll show you these guys, some Prismacolors as well. Either one are a high quality colored pencil, and they're going to be great for blending, but I always recommend a nice even pressure. You don't want to get too it's called burnished. If you press too hard and it gets too shiny right away, you kind of burnish it. It's a great way to finish a piece, but when you're blending, you want to try to have those soft finishes. So I'll go something like that. I'll come down a little further than what I want that color, and that way I can work the orange back up into it. I like to do little rounded marks as I color. That just helps to really fade the colors together. So again, kind of thicker here where the two colors met, and then I'll bring it down a little further than what I might want it to be. And that way I can go on to my next color, which is a red here, and finish that up just really lightly. When your colors get darker in value, you can press a little lighter. You don't have to be so rigorous with that. And then we'll finish up here with this nice dark brown. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of these letters, and then we'll get moving on to our bear. As I was finishing up the coloring here, I was just thinking about the fact that you could really take this picture and just change up the verse that you highlight and still be able to really make a message. Just imagine if you were looking at it from the King Herod's perspective, We're looking at it here as a mother bear protecting her young in the heat of a crisis situation out of fear. But we could also, it'd be kind of fun to put a crown on this guy and really show this as the wrath of King Herod as well. So it's really interesting because I think it's personal, and that's what I love about journaling, is that images mean different things to different people, and you can really put a twist on what your symbol, how you're symbolizing the purpose of your reading or the thing that stood out to you. I just love that. So anyway, so we've got these words here, are kind of our power words, are now nice and bright, standing out. And now we're going to be focusing on this grizzly bear. Now you can see him very lightly drawn in pencil. You could definitely go back over it and do more of an outline, cartoon style, but I'm going to go with a very specific style. I'm going to be definitely stretching some of you to think outside the box on this one. And this, if it is a little bit more than you're liking, you could always just reference your picture, looking for some lighter tones, your black, your peaches and pinks and browns, and do the bear very traditionally. But I am going to take a little spin on this just for the sake of teaching kind of a technique that I enjoy. So when we do colored pencil, one thing to always consider is that every mark that you make is a line. And so you really have the power to give this optical illusion of layers of fur or roundness of ears or the depth of the mouth just by the way that you make your marks. So because we're working with an animal, we want to have nice small short marks and layers of them so that it looks like the thickness of the fur. That's one of the reasons why I suggested that you kind of draw in some of those squiggle marks, and where there may be, like here in his wrinkles, there may be darker areas, and you can determine these layers and rolls of skin and fur. But if you also look at your color choices, you'll find that there are ways to show the lightness, mediums, and darkness values of an animal, especially in this case, but of an object, and change those, replace them for color. So let's, for instance, if I wanted to use, let's just say, a variety of colors here, get some colors out in my basket here. I can use these three colors to create the image that I have here and still give it the depth and the interest that it has, but instead of having different shades of brown, I'm going to replace them and kind of put them in order of what I find to be my lights, my mediums, and my darks. And this is really cool. I'll put a dark blue in there as well. It's really cool because you can kind of blend and use these, maybe highlight your lighter colors in the fur marks, the tick marks of the lighter areas, and then get a little heavier with the darker tones in the darker areas. So I'm going to go ahead and get coloring this in. If this is a style that you enjoy, you will find multicolored images, multicolored portraits, pet portraits, where artists use layers of colors of paint, and yet you still see what it is that you're looking at, and you still see all those layers of depth and value. So enjoy this method as you watch. If this is not for you, again, feel free to do whatever it is that you'd like with traditional colors. Just make sure when you are doing traditional colors that you are giving yourself a nice variety of every tone that you might be using. So if I was going to do traditional colors, my palette might look something like this. I know these all look the same. Here's the colors down here at the end. So I might use something like this where I have some lights, mediums, and darks, some more red, some more gray, and that's going to give you some nice variety for fur as well.